Warriors, Wizards, One Shot! Over at Kickstarter.com, the One Shot Podcast Network is currently funding the first season of The Dungeon Dome, an actual play experience that combines the style of professional wrestling with the storytelling power of Dungeons and Dragons. Performers will take on the roles of fantasy gladiators, battling it out in player versus player matches for wealth and glory. The Dungeon Dome will feature some of your favorite actual play performers, including Kat Cool of the Campaign Podcast, Mike Migdal of the Neo Scum, Pat O'Rourke of the Dungeon Rats Podcast, and Aram Farshin of God's Fall. But we can't make this project without your help, so head over to Kickstarter right now and look up The Dungeon Dome. $25 get you a seat, but you'll only need the edge.
Everything is Awesome is part of Courts and Parts, a podcast network featuring pop culture, TV, movie, and geek podcasts. Check out some of our other shows, like TV Ate My Brain, Let's Chat with Revelin Friends, and Podstalgic at courtsandparts.com.
Awesome. Just tell people they're awesome and mean it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Awesome.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
Awesome. 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 That was awesome. You guys are awesome. No, you're awesome. No, you are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I am your host, Kev, and this is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. I'm still trying to find the right place to insert. We stole this from Doom Thugs because they say that the number one podcast in Delco. I'm trying to find the right place to put number one podcast in Bucks County. I haven't figured it out yet. That's why I haven't really said it yet. But because we're interviewing a local person, I just want to say it so that he can give me props. For being the number one podcast, maybe the only podcast in Bucks County. We have to this week, he's going to be part of the 5th annual Philadelphia Podcast Fest. He is a native who got out of this area to go on to do bigger and better things. You may know him from various projects such as the Venture Brothers. Welcome to Night Vale, Tights and Fights, and of course, we got this with Mark and Hal. Please welcome to the show, Hal Lublin. Hal, thanks for doing the show.
Dude, thanks for having me. It's nice to be back in the Bucks County vicinity, even if it's just my voice right now.
So I don't know, because I know like if you go on to IMDb or Wikipedia or various other places, like there's never a single answer. Because I've seen Philadelphia and I've seen Cheltenham.
Yep.
So whereabouts are you from in this area?
I'm just a mystery. I'm from parts unknown. That one neighborhood of Philly in between the Northeast and when we get into like Girard Avenue. No, I was born at Rolling Hill Hospital, which is why Cheltenham is listed as my birthplace.
Oh,
which
okay.
is now like a completely. It's not even called Rolling Hill anymore. That's how old I am. And then I was raised in the Northeast, right near Castor and Cottman, and then we moved out to Montgomery County and Huntington Valley. And that's where my dad lives to this day, right just south of County Line Road. So a few years ago, early on in the podcast, Mark and I recorded in the basement of my father's house. So we were close to becoming the second podcast in Bucks County, but we were still on the Montgomery side. So your turf is, you keep your turf, we'll keep Montco, and we'll be fine.
There you go. I like it. It's interesting because ever since, so I've been podcasting for a long time, and in fact, I believe an episode that's going up shortly will be our 10-year celebration. Not for this show. This show has only been around for about a year and a half, but like I started in 2007. Podcasting, and I didn't know, and I'm sure like 10 years ago there was nobody podcasting in this area, and it's funny, I started emailing people for interviews to help celebrate the podcast fest, and I was like, I'm in Bucks County, so it's probably just easier to do this remotely, so you don't, because like my studio is literally my shed. Like, I mean, I don't. Yeah. I'm sure you know that many startup podcasts start out in their living room or in some sort of weird place. So luckily, I don't have to break down. But I'm also remodeling to make it a proper studio.
Yeah.
So I've been using the excuse I'm in Bucks County. You're in Philly. Let's not even do this in person. And I had 2 or 3 people who are also in Bucks County. So I know I'm not the only. I'm still keeping the claim of number 1 though. They're like, yeah, we can just come there. We're in Bucks County too. I'm like, oh crap. So it made me have to speed things up when with my remodel, which spoiler alert is not done yet. So,
how far along? So what I heard in one of your other episodes, you were talking about recording with your kid, and now your kid wants to record all the time, but you're remodeling, so you can't go in. Like, what? You got to put up the sound panels, right?
Well, no. So this shed had the pegboard walls.
Oh, okay.
So I'm like, I want this to look like nice. So I ripped down the walls. I started hanging drywall.
Right.
And I got 3 panels up, and I was like, all right, I'm going to set this aside for later. Because it's not easy. As it turns out, when you're a one-man per operation, it's not easy to do that stuff. And I'm not like... there's a reason I work in IT for my day job.
Yep.
My son is super, like, he's super into the idea of podcasting, which is great. Like, I have someone to pass this empire on to.
That's right. You have to have an heir. Very important.
So Nathan from the Philadelphia Podcast Society and the Podcast Fest, he randomly sent me a text, and he's like, you want to interview Hal? I'm like, why would you ask? Like, my answer's going to be yes. So we can thank. So do you know Nate outside of the Podcast Fest?
I know Nathan through his wife Tegan because I was on her podcast a while back, and they are friends with one of my best friends in the entire world who still lives in Philly. So it's all one. Like everything in Philadelphia, everybody knows everybody somehow. You're connected to everyone in some way.
Yeah, it is wild. Like when I like going down to the Manayunk area, I randomly bump into like one of my uncle's old friends, and they're like, and I look exactly like my uncle, so they remember me, and they're like, hey, Kev, right? I'm like, yeah, this is weird. I don't know you, and then we get the backstory. Yeah, it's like everyone knows everyone, especially in like small dunk, like in the suburbs of Philly. Everyone knows everybody.
Absolutely. We're just a big family.
Yeah, which is, it's great. It's what I love about Philadelphia, aside from the fact that the actual logistics of being within 2 hours of pretty much anywhere I ever want to go, is that like, it's just like, we're the bad guys. I love that about Philly, but like, but we protect our own.
Yes. Absolutely. You said in your intro that I got out, but to me, if I could have stayed in Philadelphia and pursued the career that I'm pursuing and building out here now, I never would have left because I love it there for that exact reason. I think we're misunderstood more than we're villains as a city. Like we're really. I've seen super nice random acts of kindness by strangers in Philadelphia. And then New York, which still to this day, like I asked someone on the subway a question and couldn't hear them, and I repeated it. They were like, "Wait, what bothered me for it?" Like immediately, they're so mad. Do not have time for me. Like that's not. I don't think you get that here.
No, I don't think you do either. And
there.
It's nuts because I feel the same way about New York. I don't go there very often.
Right.
Because there's really no need to. Everything I really want to do is within, just the 45-minute ride from Bucks County. But every now, like we did a live show up at the Producers Club last October. And so I'm walking around New York, and I dig it because like it's the first time I've been in New York in a few years, and I'm like enjoying it. And but I don't get that friendly feeling of like going up to talk to people that I do in my hometown. And I wonder if that's a thing that like just everyone kind of knows that you're from Philly just by your look, maybe, or there's something going on because everyone is super nice around here.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I've performed in New York for several years, and I love it there. I have a lot of good friends there, but there's definitely like, we grew up with a chip on our shoulders because we're 90 minutes away, and we don't have the Yankees. We don't like everything there is storied, and everything there is portrayed as the best, whether it is or it isn't. So because of that, even though we're the fifth biggest city in the country, it definitely feels like a smaller community. And no matter where you are, if you meet somebody else from Philly, you have an instant connection, and no matter what neighborhoods you're from, like a shared experience. And I think New York, because of the boroughs, doesn't have that exact same thing.
When we did, so Tattooed Mom is one of my favorite spots in the city and on South Street. They've become a great friend to the podcasting community. My first live show with Everything is Awesome was at Tattooed Mom, part of the Podcast Fest last year. And I loved it so much that when we did our anniversary show, which was basically like a mini podcast fest, I gathered 4 other podcasts and we just did one day event at Tattooed Mom. During that event, I went out to go grab a drink, and there was a local Philadelphia guy, but wearing a Patriots jersey.
Oh, come on.
And Brady, of course.
Yeah,
so,
of course it's Brady.
Him and I got into it, but like friendly. Like we were like, I bought him a drink when I left. Like I bought him and his wife a drink when I went back to the podcasting room. But we just like, it was friendly banter and like just, I didn't know this guy, and it was just like I was talking to one of my friends about sports right off the bat. That's, I've definitely have never gotten that feeling anywhere else. But I will say this about me as a Philadelphia guy, and maybe this was me as a Philadelphia guy in my 20s, when I used to travel for work a lot, and one trip took me to Dallas. So I said, okay, I know what I'm going to do, because I'm from Philly, and I'm awesome. Oh, I dress head to toe in Eagles gear.
Sure.
And I walk up to the first Dunkin' Donuts that I see in the airport with a chip on my shoulder, and I'm like, hey, buddy, I need a coffee. And like, he was super nice and was like, oh, sure, buddy. Oh, you know what? The Eagles are doing really well this year.
Oh.
And I was like, yeah. Thanks for the coffee. Tail between my legs, because I was like, I'm the bad guy. This is why people hate people from Philadelphia, because I am the stereotypical villain.
Let me offer you another angle on that story. I think that's really a story about how bad Dallas is at being a football fan city. Like, They don't get it. Like, don't pretend like we're not your rival. I'm sure the second you left, they like flipped a switch and all the Cowboys posters flipped over. Like a golden Emmitt Smith statue descended from the heavens. It's like I've met some people who are like Cowboys fans just mystify me. I don't get it.
Oh God, especially the ones that are here in Philly, like and I get it. Like when I was a kid, I was born in '84, so I grew up in like that Cowboy era where everyone was a Cowboys fan because they were winning championships in the '90s.
Yeah.
But me, like I was a Randall fan. I bleed green, and to this day, it's the same. Like I don't care how bad my team is. Like I'll tell them off. I'll yell at my TV screen. But at the end of the day, I'm not rooting for any other team that's playing the Eagles at the very least. Like I have my other sports teams that I like in football, but like especially NFC East. Like I despise the Cowboys and the Giants and Redskins, and it mystifies me, like you said, to see Cowboys fans in Philadelphia. And I mean they're all over too. It's just weird. It's so weird.
I knew some growing up, but I always just thought to myself, who hurt you? Who did this to you? I get it. Look, it's not easy being a Philadelphia fan. I was born a few years before you, but I was alive for pretty much all the terrible years of the Phillies, and now that's happening again.
Yeah.
Countless terrible, the terrible Sixers of the early to mid 90s and the trust the process Sixers of now, the Flyers being good and bad, the Eagles making all those NFC championship games. I was at the Super Bowl that they lost.
Oh my God.
Which was great. One of the second best sporting experience I've ever had. The first was Game 5 of the 2008 World Series. Yeah. Which I stayed, and then it got snowed out, you remember, like halfway through. And then I had to fly back to LA. And so my best friend got my ticket, and he and my dad went to the Sixers season opener, or a preseason game, whatever it was. I think it was a Sixers, maybe just a Sixers game, maybe their home opener. And then walked over to the bank to watch the end of that game, which I watched at home, screaming and waving a towel around. But it's not easy being a Philadelphia sports fan because we're not perennial favorites, and when we are, it doesn't feel like we are because we're not covered that way.
Yeah, I mean, because all the announcers want to hate on us too. Like, it's crazy. Like, and I'll get Troy Aikman. I'll give it to him. Like, I'll give him that because he's got cowboy blood. But like Joe Buck, I despise Joe Buck with a passion.
Yeah, there's something. I don't like him either. Nobody likes Joe Buck. Is there anybody who likes Joe Buck?
I don't think anymore. I think there was a time when people who were like Dallas maybe liked him and probably New England, but other than that, no one else liked him because he likes to hate on the teams that are like even when Philly is doing good, he likes to shit on them still.
Yeah, he does. Well, the worst is if you're watching like a football game and you see Troy Aikman in the booth, you just go, "Great, here we go." Great. Watch him try to like choke back his bile if the Eagles even kick a field goal successfully. Yeah,
but you know that as a Philly sports fan, I enjoy watching that kind of stuff. Like it's just it is win or lose. I love. I'm more of a football fan, so you know I try to stay in that world as much as I can.
Sure.
And yeah, I just love the Eagles. I mean, I personally think, and I'll get your take in a second, but I think that with this coaching staff and with this quarterback, I think we might be building towards something.
Yeah, look, we got a shot. I like the Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith signings. I think the defense will be better. Mm-hmm. Carson Wentz had a decent rookie year, not great, which is bad. I'd rather have that than have like the best rookie year ever and then a sophomore slump. I'd rather see him progress. I think it takes I always say 3 to 5 years to really see what kind of quarterback you have. Mm-hmm. But the Eagles haven't had that kind of patience with anybody in a while, and he doesn't have anybody to really mentor him outside of Doug Peterson. But he doesn't have somebody who is a teammate that is sort of a veteran. He can't play behind a Favre for a couple of years like Aaron Rodgers did. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what they can do. I'm always hopeful. And they're coming out to LA this year, so maybe I'll go to that shithole Coliseum to watch them play if I can get a ticket.
Well, and here my take on Wentz is that everyone got way too excited for the first half of that year. It was luck. That's all it was. And I agree. I'm glad that he didn't play like that all season long because it just would have been building up all this hope for this year, and we would have been way let down. And when Philly gets let down, they do not hide it.
No.
We do not hide it.
We're just Charlie Brown walking down the street with that Christmas theme playing overhead.
Yes. All right. So I do want to touch on. We can talk Philly later when we get back to the Philadelphia Podcast Fest. But something that is a huge interest of mine. I love talking to other. I say other like I am one, I am not. But I like talking to improv artists.
Yeah.
It is it's a passion of mine that I have yet to go and pursue, and I'm trying to talk my best friend into it because I'm that guy that's I can't do it on my own. So how did you get into improv? Where did you get that love for it?
Oh man, well I was in high school in 94, 95. That was when I graduated in 95 from high school. And around then, 93, 94 was when Whose Line Is It Anyway, the British version, started airing on Comedy Central. So watching it, I was like, oh, this is it all like a light went on in my head. And I'd always enjoyed sort of messing around. I went to Abington Friends, which for anybody in the Philly area that doesn't know is a hippy-dippy Quaker school out in Jenkintown. But we had a really cool series of theater teachers, and in middle school we would have this thing where people brought in hats. You'd pick a hat and create a character and then do a Q&A. And I loved being able to make something up like that and then sustain it over the course of 5 minutes or so. So I had a character that to me was the most hilarious thing ever, which was Bob from Save the Crabs, because it was a crab hat. And for 3 years when we would do that, I think I was the only one who brought a character back over and over again, and people knew who it was. So I always that was something I gravitated towards. But Whose Line really gave me an understanding of game structure. What are short form games? So my buddies and I would just sort of mess around and try to capture that and try playing those games and perform for anybody at the school that would watch us. So from there, I went to college and improvised. And then when I moved out to LA, it was, let's go to Second City, let's go to Groundlings, let's go to Improv Olympic, now IO West, and just learn as much as possible.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating form of art, not just comedy, just art. And I remember, and I think this is where like my love comes from with it. But like like everything in life, I find out in my mid to late 20s that I'm like, hey, you know what? I think I want to write and direct. Hey, you know what? I think I want to do improv. And I think it's just like, I'm at this point where I'm like, I'm in my early 30s. I'm like, you know what? There's no like, why not do stuff? Like, why not? Why just sit around and just live the status quo life? And I think podcasting, I used to, and well, I'm sure we'll touch on this later, but I used to wrestle, like WWE style wrestling.
Yeah.
And that was huge creative outlet for me, where like, when, I'm sure like every teenager, you're emo in some fashion, whether you want to believe it or not. And the world's against you. And, some people have music, some people have, drugs. I had wrestling. I was able to like have that as my creative outlet. And I think like that turned into podcasting and I think wrestling really, which is kind of a form of improv if you think about it. I think that with the American run of Whose Line Is It Anyway, and I realized that probably about 5 years ago. I was like, you know what? Whose Line Is It Anyway is a great show. So like all that combined, I was like, 2 or 3 years ago, I told my buddy, I was like, we need to go to FIT and take improv classes. Like, how fun would that be? And it just turns into finding excuses not to do it. But I told him, I was like, I'm doing it without you in February, with or without you.
Yeah, you just gotta kind of pull the trigger, and you're dead on with. I was gonna say before you even said it, that was the thought that crossed my head. Well, as somebody who's never taken a bump or gotten into a ring in his entire life, I still, I understand enough of how it basically works to know that the skills that you need to be a good improviser are also the skills you need to be a good wrestler, which is paying attention, reacting to things. Instead of playing off of the crowd necessarily, you're more playing off of your partner, but you're doing that when you're wrestling as well. It's, those skills, the skills you learn in an improv class, whether you become a performer or not, will help you for the rest of your life. And I've taught improv to like LSAT prep tutors on their first day of learning to become a tutor. And it was really about getting them out of their heads and being able to talk in front of people and being able to listen and actually hear, because a lot of times we'll just sit and wait for our chance to talk rather than actually digesting what's being said to us. Those are the foundations of being a good conversationalist or a good podcaster are the same that you need to be a good improviser.
That's super encouraging to hear, because you go back 10 years to my very first interview, and it's awful because I'm not a good interviewer, as I'm sure many of my fans and listeners will attest to. I'm not great at doing a Q&A. If I have stuff prepped, which I had stuff prepped today, and as we heard, I blundered over some things. And when I prep, it's usually a train wreck because I don't listen. That's the issue. I'm reading my notes versus listening. And hence the reason I threw my notebook to the side as soon as I had that blunder. I called the show long form interview, but I really like to bill it more as long form conversation, because that is what I'm good at, and so it's encouraging to hear if you're good at that, you at least you'll get something out of improv, and that's kind of, I don't know if I'm looking to become an improv at 32, 33 years old,
right?
But the idea of having that skill set to help me with this, and I love the idea of trying to do something with tabletop role-playing games in the podcasting world, and that seems like a perfect skill set to have for that.
100%. You're right on. It's really about the skill set you bring from it, and there's no, every single person who takes classes makes the same mistakes. So there's sort of a comfort in that, of knowing that you're going into it. I don't know of anybody who just came in and was great at it. There's always work to be done, and you make the same mistakes everybody else has made because you just don't know yet, or you think you know different. And then you get that sort of systematically ironed out of you. And you sort of figure out where you fit in an ensemble and how you can contribute. And that Mark and I, we met improvising years and years, like 15 years ago.
Wow, okay.
And over the course of the different ways that we performed together, culminating in this podcast, but going back to Thrilling Adventure Hour and stuff we did together at Second City before that, we figured out that we meshed well together because the things that we each do best are different.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, are you guys, aside from the podcast, and maybe something that I didn't warn you of, but my audience knows, is I try to do little prep ahead of time, and then I just binge listen and binge watch everything that my guest does afterwards. Keeps the conversation honest.
Sure.
So you and Mark, is your podcast improv, or is that like an addition to you guys as an improv team?
No, I mean, so the basic premise of the podcast is the two of us taking the things you debate with your friends about in a bar and then settling it once and for all.
Okay.
So, for example, when I get off of this call from you, with you, shortly after that, Mark will arrive here at my home and we'll record Best Spider-Man because now we have we have a good look at Tom Holland as Spider-Man. Let's figure out who the best one is of all time. We'll sort of break them down, and we have somebody who does research for us, which is great, and we figure out criteria, but it's really just us messing with one another, and the destination is not as important as the journey. So, the weirder, I have no idea what weird things Mark has about Spider-Man or what weird experiences he's had around it, and I don't know what stuff I'm going to share that's going to come up, but we may start talking about Spider-Man and wind up having a 20-minute conversation about bubble baths and then realize we have to get back.
That's perfect. That's my kind of show. That's this show.
Exactly. The whole idea is to feel like you're in the room with us having the conversation. So like the best compliments that I get about the show are I was yelling at my car, or I was laughing on the bus on the way to work and nobody knew why because I had my headset on. Or, the people who take to social media to tell us we're wrong or why we're right or what we should have mentioned that we didn't. Like that all means that they were highly engaged when they were listening, which is, great for us. It's what we want.
The concept of the show sounds phenomenal, and I'm hooked on the fact that I'll probably be listening to that Spider-Man one first because I can't wait to see. I haven't seen Homecoming yet. Shame on me. I'm a nerd, but it's the kids. I have two kids. It's their fault. I don't get to have a social life often because of them.
Fair enough.
But so I'm interested in that because I have my takes on it, obviously. So I would love to hear what you guys have to say. But what sells me more so than that is the fact that you guys don't care if you go on tangents, because that, to me, like the perfect podcast, and it's probably because one of the first podcasts, if not the first one I listened to, was Smodcast with Kevin Smith. Mm-hmm. Which is just two friends talking. And that's, more or less the shows that sound like that and are what I love listening to. So that excites me. I'm prepped for your show now. Cannot wait. What made you guys decide to start doing, and it sounds like maybe there's some history with podcasting before this one. So how, and it's probably an easy path, but what led from improv to podcasting?
Well, I've probably, through the people I met improvising specifically at Second City, that's sort of where my community was built. And you figure that out. Especially if you're in a city with a ton of different improv troupes or improv schools, is hopefully you try them all. You'll learn something different in each one, and there are good people everywhere. But you sort of figure out where your tribe is pretty quickly, I think. Okay. You see sort of what fits well. And for me, it was always Second City. So through relationships I made there, that was how I got started in voiceover. I got cast in a couple of anime projects early on, like right after I graduated, because one of the directors I had worked with was directing anime and thought I would be good for it. So
very cool.
That sort of launched me on that trajectory. And then just people I met, they would have a show and they would call me in to do a little part. There was a podcast I did for, I want to say like a year or so. I probably for as long as you have. Probably in 2007 we were doing it. It was called Hawk and Dove. So it was a super liberal guy and a super conservative guy, and it was just jokes back and forth about both sides debating stuff. So I played the NPR type moderator, and they had done it as a stage show first, and I played like a one-line role in that. And so because of that, they remembered me, and I got pulled in. So that was my early sort of podcasting, and then it went away until Thrilling Adventure Hour started podcasting, which was about 5 years into our run. So we started in 2005. Then 2010, they finally figured out how to get a good recording and put it out. And then from that, for 5-6 years, we built an audience up around the world. We got to tour the country. We got to go to Australia and New Zealand. Awesome. We made a concert film. We did a web series. The writers made a graphic novel. So it really, like, that podcasting has been sort of a bedrock of my career now for 7 years. And from Thrilling Adventure Hour came Night Vale. And then when Thrilling Adventure Hour was winding down, and we knew probably about 8 or 9 months before the show actually ended that it was drawing to a regular close. Now it's on indefinite hiatus. I wanted another project. I didn't want to sit and wait for somebody to ask me to do something. Yeah. And I knew Mark and I worked well together, and Mark was moving to New York from LA. So I thought, let's do a podcast together. So I grabbed him and I was like, you and I are going to do a project. He was like, okay, which is something that creative people say all the time. Yeah. Like, we're going to do a thing, and then it never happens. Yep. But I had this idea that was essentially, we got this. So I pitched it to him. He was into it. We sort of worked on it together. And then we just started doing it. And that was almost 2.5 years ago. So it's just been like, we knew we had audience from Night Vale and Thrilling Adventure Hour, some of whom would follow us over. So that was encouraging. Like, let's stay in the medium that we've had success with, but try something completely different.
Well, and that's, I guess, not only just the beautiful thing about podcasting, but the beautiful thing about new media and kind of just the times we're living in now is that it's no longer really a requirement of having to have money or having to know people to say, hey, let me go out there and make something. Like, you can literally go and do anything, audio or video wise, basically from your phone these days. So I think that's super encouraging. And it's something like, I mean, I'm sitting here, in front of a laptop with a fancy microphone to record this, and my studio is a little bit, when it's actually up and running, is a little bit fancier. But like, I record all my commercials and any kind of promo during the day, with my Apple earbuds and my iPhone, and it sounds pretty close to what I'm doing right now.
100%. Now, I've done recorded voiceover auditions into my phone in the break room at work. I've booked pilots that way, like, because the sound quality is fine. Like, it sounds good. And I've been thinking a lot about this lately, because what's great about podcasts is exactly what you're saying, that anybody can do it. You can get access inexpensively to the equipment you need, to hosting. You can, all in for probably less than $300, be up and running at a decent quality very quickly. Yeah. So while it's not a level playing field, it's an open playing field. So you've always got a shot, and there are avenues to sort of move yourself along. It just depends on how seriously you take it, or what your strategic approach is. Some people just want to make the thing and have that be it. I'm business minded, so I want to just create the thing, and I'm not going to change what it is unless it feels creatively like something is off. But I also am always trying to figure out, how can we grow, what's working for us and what isn't from a marketing perspective.
And it's funny, because I started out 10 years ago saying, all right, I want to be the Howard Stern of podcasting. And I was like, I'm going to find ways I want to become a millionaire off this. I'm going to tour and whatnot. And that was like always for me, and obviously everyone's different. For me, that was like, that held me back, like having that mindset. And it wasn't, I mean, over the course of 10 years, I've had I've averaged more than one show a year, with whether it was running concurrently with one another or not. I've jumped from show to show to show, just trying to find what worked.
Right.
Never ever thought of saying, I'm going to sit down and do an interview show, because I always thought that was what I was weak at. And when I finally said, you know what, I just love sitting around talking. Like, that's my favorite thing to do. And my fiance she teaches fifth graders all day. And when she comes home, she doesn't want to deal with me and my nonsense. So, so it's like, okay, well, let me start a podcast where I just talk to someone new every week. That way I don't have to rely on a co-host. And like, it's just for me. Like, I don't need to make money off of this. Like, that's not my bag anymore. And once I like got that weight off my shoulders, it became a thing where I was like, I've never been more creatively fulfilled as I have doing this show. Save for wrestling. Wrestling was totally such a fun, creative thing to do.
Yeah.
But like, other than that, like, this has been, podcast wise, such a huge, like, fun thing to do. And it has led to me doing live shows on a semi-regular basis, on a basis that, like, if I want to do them, I can do them. It's opened up so many more doors to, like, being able to chat with people that I never thought I'd chat with. And just, it's amazing when, I guess, like I said, my mindset's different. I'm not about like the business side necessarily, which I guess I'm doing it the right way now. I started off not caring, and I think that's the key, is if you start off not caring, eventually you'll get to a point where, like, all right, well, let me make these moves to maybe better the show and build my audience, and then maybe start making money off it. And I'm starting to, after a year and a half of this show, I'm finally back to the point where I was like, all right, I think I can make moves now to, like, start turning this into something more than just me talking to a mic.
Totally. And like, I don't, while I do think of it in terms of growth, it's not about money for me as much as how big of an audience can I get? Because I'm really proud of the show, and I really want as many people as possible to hear it. So it just becomes, well, I know if I could get these people to listen, that they would really enjoy it. And there are with very few exceptions, people who listen to it really enjoy it, and they're into the concept. And you don't have to listen from episode 1. You can sort of pick and choose what you like, but they're all kind of different. And it's, in terms of if I could have mapped this out, I'm really happy with where we are. Just, I wish we had 1 million more listeners every month. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and that it is such the the podcaster thing to do is, like, I don't know many, except for me of 10 years ago. I don't know many podcasters that are like, I'm in it for the money. It's I think 10 years ago, when it was a new medium, you kind of had that mindset because you're trying to figure out what a podcast was. And, it was, I guess, new enough where you could maybe do it. But it's now that everyone literally, like, I mean, I think my mom knows what a podcast is at the very least. So, like, a lot of people know what a podcast is. A lot of people can do a podcast now. So now it's more about, like, just, being that different to get that audience. And, like, for me, like, I have these crazy ideas of what it means to be successful, and it's like, oh, great, these numbers are great this month, and it's only a podcaster cares about that. Same thing with, like, I'm crazy about how I number things. Like, I need to have a number on my episode. I need to, if I miss a week, I need to make sure that when I post it, it's dated the correct date that it was supposed to post. Yep. It's combined my OCD, and I think what only podcasters care about.
No, yeah, like, the naming convention has to be the same, and how we, like, the way we do it has to be very rigid and uniform, so that somebody knows, like, that's the numbering of an episode of We Got This. It's very clear. Like you point out, nobody cares but us. Yeah. But I also, like, I'm manic about making sure that we don't skip a single week. So we started, I think, March 5th, 2015. We have not missed a week since. Even episodes where we recorded the night before it had to go out. Like, it's just, I will not miss it. I have backup and contingency plans. Like, I'll pull my wife in. Doesn't matter. We're getting this episode out by hook or by crook.
And that is something for I think my first year of this podcast I was super good about, because I was like, you know what, I was so inconsistent before this. I need to do a year of straight podcasting, and I was super successful at that. And now, because like I'm starting to bring on more projects, it's like I have it recorded. I have plenty of episodes recorded. It's like, oh crap, it's Tuesday night and I need to get this out for tomorrow. What am I gonna do?
Yeah. Totally. You have to. That's part of building an audience. Like, think about how many television shows that were good television shows died a quiet death because they kept moving time slots. So you're like, is it on this week? Where's it on? How am I going to find it? So even though it's like this concept of pod being portable on demand means it doesn't matter. We put the episodes out at 9 p.m. Pacific time every Tuesday, but people may not listen to it then. They might wait and listen to it on Thursday, Friday, the next week. They may be months behind. But for me, mentally, knowing that it's always there and that I can promote it that way feels like that's the key to building that audience. They're going to know. We're reliable. We're like the Postal Service. We're always going to be there.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. But I'm also like, because I'm taking on more projects, it's like, well, you know what? It's going to be there. If it will show up in their feed. It is, and I think it's like, I agree with you. I want to be the guy that posts at midnight or whenever every single Wednesday. And I try my damnedest to. And I think my audience at this point knows that I try, and that's all I think they want and care about at this point. But I agree, like it's whereas I think you need to post on a regular schedule, and I mean you can read a dozen articles about podcasting and marketing ideas, and that will be probably the top two things they say. That will be one of them. But I also think it's one of those things that only podcasters kind of care about. and maybe that's the bad mindset, because it's given me an excuse to, I missed it, so it's okay, I can post on Thursday.
But I found as a listener, and I don't know if this is affected by being a host, but the podcasts that I really enjoy that are can't miss for me, I'm waiting. I've already finished the most recent episode, and I'm waiting. So I listen to Bruce Pritchard's podcast. I love it. And I know it comes out generally Friday mornings around 9 my time. So I make sure I finish the previous week's episode by then so that I can download it and have it ready to go and enjoy it. Like, I like being caught up, and partially it's because that's such a long, it's like a 3-hour show.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
I know I'm going to have to work through it over the course of a few days, because I just nobody on earth has 3 hours to just sit there and do one thing that is a leisure thing for that long.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's my expectation for my own show that's feeding how I listen, or that my listening patterns are maybe somewhat normal. I know some people who listen to ours are waiting for it to come out, and they're checking and refreshing their feeds. So for some people it's like that. Other people say, I'm just catching up on old episodes, and they're tweeting or writing Facebook posts for us about things that happened last year. There's no way. It's not normalized, but in my brain, it at least helps to make it feel like, well, the production line is humming and it's working, and people know when they can expect something from us, even if they don't listen to it then.
Yeah, and that's I think a great mindset, and I think it's a mindset I definitely want to get back to, because you're right. Like there's I think the podcast for me that is the one that, like, I can't believe it's not out yet, is Campaign Pod. With it's a Star Wars actual play podcast with a bunch of great Chicago improv people and comedians and whatnot. And nice. It is, if you love Star Wars, this is basically Rogue One, but before Rogue One came out.
That sounds amazing.
And it is, and my buddy Jeff Stormer, who hosts Party of One podcast, he has a much more elegant way to phrase this, but it's essentially, it takes place during the time where, like, Luke would have been 5 years old, and it's this band of misfits that somehow come across the plans for what they are calling the murder ball. And it is just, it's very loose on the rules and on actual, like, progress, where the GM allows for a lot of like I think they spent in real time about a year and a half on one story arc that in game was a week long, and it was phenomenal. It's just so funny, and that is the one where the GM has like migraine issues, and like very bad migraine issues, so they don't come out on a regular schedule. But I listen to it, and then I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And so I don't know if because that definitely doesn't inform me on how I make my posts. Maybe it does. I guess it does if it doesn't come out weekly. So there's something to what you're saying. Then I think you're 100% accurate.
I nailed it. You talked yourself in a loop, but you came back to my way of thinking, and that's what I need in life. Yes. I need validation, for goodness sake.
So what made you getting back to the interview, of course. What made you go out to LA to pursue your career?
I didn't know what I was going to do after college. I knew I wanted to be an actor. I actually was an apprentice at the Ardent Theater downtown on 2nd Street. Okay. And I knew being there, like, that is a great program. The Ardent Apprentice program, if it still exists, it was great for people who knew they wanted to work in theater but didn't know what they wanted to do, because you sort of did a little bit of everything. And I would just sit there while people were rehearsing and performing and going, well, that's what I want to do. I have no question what I want to do. So I was trying to figure out where to go. I was going to maybe go to DC and do theater there, or maybe I'll go to Chicago, the mecca of improv, and I'll study it at Second City, and then I'll eventually become main stage, and then my life will be set. But one of my friends from AFS who lived out in LA, was talking to him on the phone. He said, come out to Los Angeles and we'll be movie stars. And I said, okay. And I packed everything up in the car 3 months later and drove across the country to LA. My first day there was September 1st, 2000. And I never looked back. And it every day is a new lesson in how to build a career in entertainment. The first of which was to understand that the goal is not to be a star. The goal is to work.
Yeah.
It used to be like, well, by time I'm 30, surely I'll have my Best Supporting Actor Oscar. And then I can just make some choices and take it easy. But we're well past 30. That has not happened. But I've learned a lot more about what it takes to work. And it's every day is a new kind of battle and a new lesson. And it's a war of attrition. There's so many people who get discouraged and leave. So sometimes just being around and being competent is enough to get you working for people to remember you. So podcasting obviously wasn't really as much of a thing or really at all back in 2000, but now it's a really important part of my life. I like you, I grew up idolizing Howard Stern as an interviewer and like a talk show guy. I remember when he came to Philadelphia, and that was what I wanted to do initially. Was I'm going to host a radio show. It'll be my version. It won't be as lewd, but I want to be able to interview and talk with people. And now, 15 years after being in LA, that's finally what I'm doing. It was something where I wasn't playing other people, but was actually myself hosting my own show. And now it's been 2.5 years of that.
You may be the one person to either tell me that I made this up or remember this. I was in high school at the time, so it was like late 90s, maybe early 2000s. You may have been, I guess you could have been out of Philly by then. Right. But YSP was looking for DJs, and they wanted people to submit tapes. And I swear this is my origin. My radio, wanting to be a radio host origin was like, oh my God. And me and one of my good friends at the time were like, we know how to talk. Why not us? And we never did it. But years later, when I listened to this podcast, and a buddy of mine was like, do you want to do a podcast? I'm like, what's that? And they're like, it's internet radio. I'm like, I can talk. and that's thus the dream was born. I don't, and you know what, thinking about the timeline, you were probably in LA, so you can't put me on there. I need to find someone to tell me if I made this up in my head. I feel like it's something that YSP did maybe often, but they were looking for the story I remember is they had a commercial saying, "Do you want to be a radio DJ?" And they had all the crazy sound effects in the background, of course. And they, said, "Send your demo tape to blah 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 blah." And they were looking for just like someone on the street to be a DJ.
That sounds like something that any radio station would do. I wouldn't put it past YSP. At that point, though, in the late 90s, I was in college, and I was doing stuff on the college radio station there, but on other friends' shows. I wasn't hosting a show. Even then, I was just like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll be Billy West. I'll go in and do Randy the Macho Man Savage for 45 minutes, or I'll go in and be Captain Crunch for an hour. So that was the stuff that I was doing, and I was so I was like, this is my launching pad. This I don't even know if we were broadcasting outside of the studio to anybody listening. But it was such a rush, and it still is. I love sitting down in front of a microphone and talking to people, and or playing characters that do it. That's just my joy comes out of microphones.
It is crazy because you know what, it's that statement still stays true to me. If I go back to wrestling, is I started off in the backyard like every idiot kid that wants to be a wrestler. I was, I think, 15 when I started doing it, and we eventually moved to the point where we built a ring, and then I live in Falls Township in Bucks County. They made us tear down the ring. They shut us down. So we said, okay, we'll go to Bristol Township and we'll buy a ring and put it in someone's backyard. and from there, at that point, when as soon as we built a ring, some of us were real serious about it, and I was one of them. And I loved, my favorite part to this day is being a good stick man and being able to cut a good promo. And I remember there's key promos that I remember cutting that I just loved, and being the bad guy. And I love talking to a mic. I mean, it's, I think, pretty obvious if you listen to any podcast I do. I usually dominate the conversation. But yeah, I mean, that's wrestling again is another thing that is all not only is it about improv and whatnot and about being quick on your feet, but it's about being quick on the mic too.
Yeah, 100%. And understanding that the important thing is to get a reaction from the crowd, and not something I brought in. That's something I brought into doing Welcome to Night Vale, where I play a character named Steve Carlsberg, who for a long time was kind of reviled. Now that crowd's kind of split, he's sort of more of a tweener, but for me, he was always a babyface. So, I would get legit heat in a ton of different cities. I expected Philly to boo me the hardest, but surprisingly, Chicago, I think, were the loudest chorus of boos I ever got doing live shows. And then that changed over the course of time as that character sort of evolved and his relationship with the main character Cecil evolved. There were more cheers than boos, but for me, I never cared how they reacted as long as they reacted.
Yeah.
And they were loud and they were having fun. So, I think that there may be some performers where that it becomes sort of an ego thing, because to be booed is failure in traditional theatrical performing, but in wrestling, you're getting a reaction that's great. And if you are supposed to be the heel, even better. That is your goal, is to be hated. Yeah. Your goal is to get it. Watch The Miz. If you want to see one of the best working heels, he and Alexa Bliss are so good at never giving the crowd what they want. And everything is designed to get them to hate you more and let you know it.
Every time wrestling comes up, it makes me. I haven't watched it in years. I kind of, when Shawn Michaels left, I fell out of it.
You lost your smile?
I lost my smile when Shawn Michaels left for good. And my big problem is I love the idea about WWE Network, except for the fact that it doesn't air. It takes 2 months to air Raw, and that's I'm busy putting my kids to bed at 8 o'clock. I don't have 3 hours to watch Raw. So when am I going to watch Raw if I can't watch it on the network? But it is one of the things I miss. Every time I bring it up, I miss watching it. Because it just, and as I'm talking about it, I'm like, man, I kind of want to I wonder, there's got to be a league around here. Like, I could probably still get in the ring at 32 years old.
There you go.
It is. Bumping is not as bad as you think it is. Like, I mean, unless you take a bad bump, but like, that's not like my worry is more so like remembering how to be in that character. Like, cause it's been, I think the last time I did it was in 2009. So it's been like 7 to 8 years since I've been like, let me put on the heel shtick for a while. But yeah, so I do want to talk about that briefly because you also do a podcast about wrestling, correct?
Yes, yeah. So I have 2 podcasts on the Maximum Fun Network. One is We Got This, which is my show with Mark, and the other is a Maximum Fun production that I just co-host, which is Tights and Fights, and that's me, Danielle Radford, and Open Mike Eagle. And our producer is a really cool guy named Julian Burrell. So we are all huge Marks. So we just get together every week and just sort of talk about wrestling and the culture of wrestling and wrestling's impact on culture. And, just sort of, there's nothing really off limits. And it's so much fun. It's one of the highlights of my week. And it forces me to stay current with things, which is tough. Like this week, there was a pay-per-view. So I spent 2 hours last night watching it, and then I finished the 3rd hour this morning. Then Raw's tonight, SmackDown is tomorrow. So I have to sort of squeeze in time to watch 5 hours of programming, preferably after it's live so I can sort of fast forward through commercials and stuff by Wednesday when we record. So it's tough.
So yeah, I mean that's one of the I think things that's nuts about it is that there's just so much of it now from one product. But I mean I think the last time I had a solid conversation about this was almost a year ago. So I'm sure that things have changed in that time. What's your take on the wrestling world as it stands in 2017?
I think that WWE has not as deep a roster as they had during the Attitude Era because that was just an insane amount of talent. Everybody was over top of the card to the bottom of the card. Even the dark matches probably got huge pops. But I think that they've got a lot of talent right now. This brand split is way better than the brand split that they did before, and I think the problems with wrestling right now are symptomatic of what the problems were starting the Attitude Era, when the sort of face-heel dynamic got thrown off. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem sometimes. It's like I want the bad guys to be detestable, and I want the good guys to be people you want to cheer. But now it seems like a lot of times the audience is dictating, well, we want to, I don't want heels trying to be cool heels. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that needs to happen organically, I think.
Yeah, and it's funny. I listen to the Edge and Christian podcast.
Oh, so good.
Oh, it is so good. I've sent them a few. I don't think I've emailed them. I think I've just sent them some tweets saying, "Hey guys, I do a podcast called Everything Is Awesome. Just saying, you should be on the show." But their show is so. Again, I think what makes that show stand out is that it's not like Austin's show or like Jericho's show where it's just straight up interviewing. And I know Austin kind of deviates. I like when he deviates too. I've started listening to him again because of that. But the great dynamic that Edge and Christian have is that there's 2 of them, so like they go on the wild tangents. It's not straight interviews. Sometimes they do episodes of just nonsense. And
yes.
I really appreciate that. And they have, they said the same thing about the cool heel. Like that's the issue is everyone wants to sell merchandise, and to sell merchandise, you can't be detestable, and you have to be the cool heel if you're going to be a heel, and everyone's a cool heel. So that's, it's interesting to know that's like an issue across the board.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's the business part gets in the way, and merchandise wasn't as big a deal during the territory era. Like in the 70s, Blackjack Mulligan wasn't worrying about selling T-shirts, and Ric Flair didn't have a million T-shirts and gym shorts and robes that he was selling. You made money by drawing houses, and you drew houses by either being the heel that people paid to see beaten or the babyface that people were paying to watch win.
Yeah.
So the economy of it has changed it kind of indelibly.
I mean, as someone that I don't know if you're familiar with Reckless Youth, Tom Carter.
No.
He is an indie guy. He was like the king of the independents in the 90s. He is as a fellow Philadelphian, he is the co-founder of Chikara.
Okay.
And he was at one point he was in the WWE farm system. Remember Rico with Billy and Chuck?
Yeah, sure. Rico Constantino.
He was going to be that character. They asked him to do that gimmick, and he said, "I don't have anywhere to go after that. I'm not doing that gimmick."
Wow.
And I think eventually he just I think he left because he started having kids, but like he just rather stay in the indies. Like he did the indies after that because he had a big name like in the Northeast, so he's the guy that trained me, and like I always wanted to play a heel. I always wanted to be a guy that like made the audience so mad,
right?
That like I mean, and of course as in the indie, I mean at least when I did it. None of us were concerned with merchandise. We were all just concerned with having a good time and telling a good story. And yeah, like that's some of my best memories of wrestling, whether it's me doing it or watching it on TV, is like having that heel that's not, trust me, I like the cool heel too. I like the Austin. I like the Shawn Michaels heels. But like, I also love the heels that are like, I want to boo them and like, I legitimately hate them. Because it's you need a villain. You need a villain to tell a good story, and that's all wrestling is telling a good story.
For sure. Just like podcasting. Tell a good story in a podcast. So
Exactly.
similar skills abound. You know, it's all storytelling. You want to tell a good story and get people invested in it.
All right. So before I let you go officially, obviously you are going to be part of the Philadelphia Podcast Festival for the 5th anniversary of it.
Yes.
On Friday, the 21st of July at the Ruba Club, correct?
Yes. Yeah, this is exciting.
Yes, at 8 p.m. Now, the Ruba, I've never even heard of the Ruba Club. They have so many more venues this year. I was part of the Philadelphia Podcast Fest last year. There was about 35 shows last year, which is still a lot, and it was 2 weekends, just like it is this year. And it was, I think it was only 2 or 3 venues. I think it was only 2 venues. I think it was Amalgam and Tattooed Mom.
Okay.
So this year has blown up to over 60 shows. We've brought, I say we, Nate and Tegan have brought in talent from outside to help celebrate the big thing. They've brought back some home talent with you and Mark with We Got This. So are you excited to be part of the Philadelphia Podcast Fest?
Man, I'm thrilled to be a part of it, and it's really exciting to come back. Like I've had the chance to come back to Philly a few times with Night Vale. Like, they do a show in town once a year. So I think the last 3 years we've done the Keswick. We did TLA the year prior to that. So every year I get to come and perform, and it's always great. I love to be home and performing in front of a hometown crowd, but this is really, really special to me to get to bring my show home and show it to the people of Philadelphia. And the fact that the podcasting community seems to be so vibrant and that it supports a festival and these shows all over the place is amazing. And I'm really excited to be a part of that.
Yeah, I'll tell you this is like I've gotten involved with the podcast festival and with live podcasting with the goal of, knowing that I'm not going to be the guy that everyone's knocking the door down for, but with the idea of why can't we be like LA or New York or Chicago where live shows are happening every weekend for podcasts, because that doesn't happen in Philly quite yet, not for podcasts. And I think this is the year where the it's going to change. I think it's the biggest year yet for the Podcast Fest. It is it's just there's something in the air this year that I'm really excited about, and obviously having bigger name shows come in has a lot to do with it. But yeah, it's an exciting year for Philadelphia and podcasting, and I'm excited to see what happens between now and the 6th annual Podcast Fest, because I mean it doubled in the year that I was involved. So I can only imagine what happens the next year.
It's awesome, and it's all about building that community. I mean, the shows coming from the outside are great, and I'm glad that Justin and Sydney are going to be there, and the Flophouse Boys, and was it Harry Potter, the Sacred Text? Is that the other? And then we're coming in, like, that's awesome. We love being a part of it, obviously, but it's also great to have the community build up and everybody, you create a rising tide and float all boats. And that I think is what supports those live shows, is like partnering up with other shows and doing bills together, like you did that time when you put the 4 shows together. That's the stuff that you do that makes it sort of stand out as a pod. I don't think there is like a podcasting city right now because it's so remote by nature. There are a ton in LA, obviously there are a ton in New York, but maybe Philly could be the podcasting city.
It feels like the podcasting city, and maybe I'm saying that because I live it, and I know a lot of podcasters in this area, but I said that to a buddy of mine who is a podcaster in Chicago, and he said I was out of my mind. I said, I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens, because it just feels like it's something that could be just another option, really, just for entertainment in the city that isn't there right now, that I feel is missing. But that's just me being a podcast fanatic, a podcast mark, if you will.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if Philly became the podcast city, I would be thrilled.
Oh God, yeah, we need some sort of championship, and I hope it's besides the AFL, we need something besides the Philadelphia Soul. So maybe it's podcasting.
Dude, I have a bet right now with my buddy Steve, who is a Knicks fan. First of all, I bet him nothing. I just said I'll bet you the Sixers make the Eastern Conference Finals before the Knicks, which I think is a slam dunk. But I have a bet that I made a few years ago that the Sixers would be 500 or better by this season. This is the last season to get to 500 or better. And if I lose, I have to write he will write a post for me that I will have to post on social media, which will be extremely embarrassing about how terrible Philadelphia sports is. But the best part is if I win, then he has to pay me a fine every time he trash talks any Philadelphia team. And I will have ears everywhere. I will get rich off of his back. I think we can do it. I think we can do it this year. Come on, Philly.
You know what? I'm not a big basketball fan, but I will. I mean, if I did root for a team, obviously I'm a Philly nerd, so I'm obviously going to go Sixers. But even more so now, I'm going to start watching the games to help give those positive vibes.
Thank you.
To so that you can get rich off those fines.
Yeah, we need it.
All right. Is there anything you would like to plug besides the Podcast Fest before we let you go?
Well, I just want to add in for that show, we have Maureen Johnson as a guest, who is also a Philly area native. And is now a successful writer and podcaster herself. So if you don't know who Mark and I are and you know who Maureen is, that's a great reason to come. But geez, you can go to my website, hallublin.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Hal Lublin, and you'll find all the links to the shows there. And go check out the stuff that I do. I really appreciate it, and especially the people in Philadelphia. I hope I see you next Friday. It would mean a lot to me to have a good hometown crowd there to see the show.
Yeah, and especially because I'm really disappointed because the second half of the week, the Podcast Fest, I'm on vacation, so I'm going to miss a lot of the stuff. The second, I like to be biased about the first half of the weekend because I'm there, but honestly, a lot of the at least the local stuff for sure, like a lot of my favorite shows are on that back half of the Podcast Fest. So, if you're listening to this and you need an excuse to see the Philadelphia Podcast Festival, let it be Hal, but go check out all the shows that you can.
That's right.
Yeah, support. It's all, I mean, regardless of it being local Philly podcasters or guys like we got this with Mark and Hal or the Flophouse or Sawbones or Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, whether it's the smaller shows or the bigger shows, like it's all, podcasting's all indie art. So just come out and support it because it's, I don't know, for me, it means something. It means a lot to support podcasting. So go do it.
100%.
Hal, thanks for doing the show.
Dude, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Anytime.
Oh God, I loved it. I didn't know because I always get nervous when I have a guy with a verified check mark on my show. So it's like, oh God, this is it's all of a sudden it's real.
Me and my check mark approve of this podcast. This podcast is now verified by me.
Oh God, I want to put that at the head of every podcast.
Please.
All right. For Everything is Awesome, I'm Kev. You can find the show on Twitter at RealAwesomePod. You can find me on Twitter where I do most of my nonsense on at ThatNerdyKev on Twitter. You can find the show on AwesomePodcast.com. Of course, we're part of the Core Temp Arts Podcast Network on CoreTempArts.com. Again, For Everything is Awesome, we've been awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Core Temp Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Core Temp Arts shows, visit CoreTempArts.com.